Welcome to the Yin Project. I'm your host, Emily Bevan. Christine,
Emily!
it's so good to have you on. Welcome to the show. Thank you. I know we have a big time difference, about 12 hours, so it's dark in your world, and it's just getting light in my world, and we have a rainy morning here in Sonoma. So you are the first Bay Area woman who is really having a global impact and this global footprint with BodyOS. Tell us all about it. Tell us how it came to be, and tell us about how you were really called to do this work. The calling, because you were called, you had this calling during the pandemic. Like, tell us how that all transpired to switch from something very sort of right brain to very left brain.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, right at the beginning of COVID, there we were, locked down. And one of the first things I noticed was my wellness practice was changing. And I was very used to going to yoga classes in my local community. So I started logging in online and quickly realized that the online streaming in the wellness world was not nearly as didn't nearly have as much connection as I had hoped. And I had a moment, it was around April 2020, where I had the calling. I had the moment where I said, this is something I want to change. And it's really interesting because when you look at your why, and I'm finally at that point in my life where I'm on my mission, have a purpose, I'm fulfilling my why. First and foremost, it's to solve a problem that I have for myself. And as I started studying the industry and looking at different wellness practices, I started doing trainings, traveling. Even during COVID, I did a little bit of traveling and studying things like sound therapy and vibration, yin yoga. Um, what I found was these practices aren't being delivered in their original form.
Right.
Many of the practices are Eastern based indigenous practices, Tai Chi, yoga, all out of the Eastern part of the world. And I had been to the Middle East, and I had been to India and Asia, and here now in the Middle East. And what I noticed was when these practices arrived in the West, they were arriving in a form that wasn't true to their essence. And the more I dug and the more I studied, I realized the disconnect. And I say the Western world, and it's kind of like the Western / modern world, because many large cities on the whole globe um, tend to be following a Western way. And the more I dug, the more disappointed I got with how these practices were being passed down. Most of them were put in the fitness category. Most of them were a product of vanity, what you looked like, who you were. I would start traveling and going to different studios and noticing who's there and what's important to them. And, I'm there to take a yoga class, and people are taking selfies, posting them online, and it didn't
And what
vibrate.
pants you're wearing, and the outfit, and the gear, and like the whole thing. I just
It's a whole
I want to interject quickly. Like, what give me an example of how it sounds like it just gets watered down from its true essence. So I'm imagining like a really complex, yummy, I don't drink anymore, but like a really amazing wine that just kind of gets like less and less and less, and then you wind up with I don't know, you wind up with all the way down to water. Like, it gets totally watered down. Is
yeah,
that how it feels? Is that how it felt?
not only get watered down, it gets changed. It's not just diluted, it's changed, it's different. And the first thing I thought of when I started describing that was it's about what people value, right? So in the Eastern indigenous practices, they value the mind-body connection. So there was an emphasis on the whole person. To us, it's the mental health, the social health, the emotional health, and the physical health. It was all together. Everything is connected. You're one being. And in the Western world, it seemed that these practices were being changed to fit what people value. They were valuing vanity. They were valuing mostly the physical aspect. I've been to too many yoga classes where we start doing things like push-ups and sit-ups and that isn't yoga. I mean, that has nothing to do with yoga.
So like a better, faster, stronger.
Yeah, you gotta look good, right? And it's like, what
Yeah.
about the inside, right? Listen, physical exercise is good for you. Walking is great for you. Lots of different physical exercise. Great. I think people need it. I think people need to move their body. But when it comes to Tai Chi, when it comes to yoga, which seems to be the most popular in the Western world, and that does have to do with this amount of movement. In actual yoga in India, the asanas, the physical practice, is 5% of the practice. It's not really
Right.
heavily based in physical movement. And when you are doing these physical postures, they are preparing your body for meditation. So that gets lost along the way. And like you had said earlier, it goes back to who's wearing what, who you're going to yoga with, who you're standing next to. There's mirrors in the room, which I never really understood. I like to practice my yoga without a mirror because I'm not fixated on what is my posture perfect. I'm really just fixated on what's going on inside. And so I got really frustrated. And I started again. I'm a reader. I'm a researcher. It's so interesting to me, all this information. And I found many groups of people saying the same thing, like, especially people that come from India, that come from these practices, right? They look at America, for example, and say, what are you guys doing? Well, this isn't yoga. So another thing that really stuck out to me was many yoga studios that I have been to were very heavily female. And it struck me as odd because yoga was originally intended and practiced by men. So we've taken this practice, we have in the West have turned it into exercise, and that's how it lives in the Western world. Now, of course, there are exceptions. There are studios that I have visited in many countries in different parts of the world where they are practicing traditional yoga. But there are too many that are not. I studied the gym, the concept of a gymnasium. We didn't have that 100 years ago. There was no gym.
No, unless you
Because
were training to be an athlete. You wouldn't go.
if you were
Yeah.
training to be in the Olympics, yeah,
Right. You would go to a gymnasium.
You'd go to a gymnasium, yes, and you would do physical exercise to build muscles for whatever this sport you were training. Okay, and it's so interesting because this is going to take me into a different area of this conversation, but as a woman, I can only speak to women. I'm not a man, so I can only speak to what is, my experience. Thank you. And I love physical exercise. I love going for a walk. I love my yoga. I love my Tai Chi. I love my meditation. When you put me in a gym, which I did 2 HIIT workouts this week, okay? I go to a HIIT workout for connection because I live alone. I work alone. And so for me, I just want to go to a class, someone tell me what to do. We're lifting weights. But when I'm in a gym now, in this part of my life, I look at the equipment, I look at, the exercises, and it's really, strength training is good for you.
Yes.
But so is walking, right? And so is lifting your child, and so is carrying your groceries, okay? And so is like walking to the store instead of driving. And it makes me reflect heavily on our world now versus our world 100 years ago, right? It's like my mother didn't have a gym to go to. She didn't need one. She walked to school. She walked to the store. She cleaned the house. I think she cleaned every day. If you get on your hands and knees and you're scrubbing your floor and you're cleaning your oven, right? You are doing a workout.
Yeah.
And likely a much more, what's the word I'm looking for? A much more balanced, right? You're doing these exercises, you're moving your body in less linear ways and more uh, yeah, less linear, if that makes sense too.
Yeah, it does. So I'm going to the gym right now, and so much of the message that we get right now for perimenopause women is like strength, building muscle, building muscle. The more muscle you have, the more fat that you will burn, and you shouldn't be doing, high intensity because of cortisol spikes. I have a lot of messages going on in my brain, by the way, around fitness.
Right.
And sometimes I go to the gym, and
Yeah.
right now it's a good routine to have, and I'm enjoying doing it. Right now I'm just kind of establishing a routine. But there are times when I get there and I'm like, this feels so arbitrary. Like, okay, I'll do this, versus, well, I could be cleaning my house and that would actually be productive as well. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's work.
Yes.
That's actually work. I could be gardening, I could be doing these other things where there's a benefit to it, and sometimes going to the gym can feel kind of, "Okay, I guess I'll do this now," and it doesn't feel like
Well,
there's a
I
strong
hear you.
connection.
Yeah, I haven't been on a treadmill in years. I'd rather take a walk, right? When I get on the treadmill, which I have been on, I feel like the hamster on the hamster wheel, right?
Yeah,
It's like I'm on this
totally.
machine
Yes.
that the
Yes.
modern world designed for me to get exercise, but I can also go outside and do the same thing, if not better, in fresh
Okay, so you had all of these feelings. You've thought,
air.
I can create something better. Tell me how BodyOS came to be. What's the current stage? And how do people kind of get started in the process? How do people sign up?
It's interesting because I hear you when you say, like, I had this calling to build something better, and I am building something. And it's funny because it's like, instead of building, I feel more like I am teaching and
Mm,
stripping away. And someone
mhm,
said to me, uh, "You're trying to change people's behavior." And I said,
mm,
"Yeah, yeah, including my own." I mean, my practice has changed tremendously in the last few years. I had a moment before this calling, back in 2016. I was
mhm,
driving in my car way too many hours, as you can relate. So many hours,
mhm,
like, absolutely not good for the body. Working too many hours, 7 days a week,
mhm,
always on the phone, always on the computer, not eating right, not sleeping right. And I got to that breaking point and I pulled over on the side of the road. I think I was outside of Sacramento somewhere. And I was on the phone with a friend of mine and I said, I can't do this anymore. My body is not, I can't do it. I can't keep doing this thing, which is like just working all the time. Like, there has to be something else. There
mhm.
has to be balance in my life, right? And I was doing yoga between appointments and playing tennis between appointments. I had that physical activity, and honestly, showing property for 12 hours, there's a lot of physical activity going on there. You're
Yeah,
moving
yeah.
constantly, right?
Sometimes those doors can get stuck and you gotta really turn the key.
Jump fences, all of it.
I know. I know.
I Yeah. So, I actually Uh, but, I got to that point, right? I was done. And my friend said, Are you okay?" He thought I kind of lost it, and I felt like I was. And I said, "I can't do this anymore. I can't be in my car all day every day. It's not good for
Mhm.
you." I started thinking about all the people that drive all day every
Oh, I
day, like,
know. Like truck
right?
drivers?
Yes. My back, I would get up in the morning. I could barely get out of bed. And I was in my 30s. And I'm thinking to myself, this is not right. And so my
Right.
friend calmly said, I remember this conversation. He said, "Okay, so if you can't do this anymore, what what is it you want to what is it you want to do?" And I said, "I just want to do yoga all day." And he was like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "No, I just wanted to be in that place
Yeah,
that I get to when I'm on my yoga mat."
yeah.
Now, you know, I after that is when COVID happened. I started doing some different trainings and things. I started listening to a lot more books and things in the wellness world than I ever had, just trying to grab all these pieces and,
I think
build
we
from.
all have. I think we all have. Like we're in this era where it's all at your fingertips. And yes, you have to be measured and you kind of have some boundaries because you can certainly go down some deep dives. But you actually mentioned something earlier, and I just want to circle back on it. You talked about how you were feeling your own lack of programming in that was available to you. And I find that the best doctors, the best people that are really helping other people have had their own personal challenges. You know, whether they had, I don't know, celiac disease as a child before it was really discovered. And so then they went down this whole research or, people that are discovering all of these things. They either had a family member, a close friend, or they went through it themselves. And those are the people that are the biggest advocates, the ones that are just really making waves and making changes. So certainly if anyone can do it, you can do it. But I love that you're like, I'm going to solve my own problem. Like I have this problem. I have a, like a health condition or something. I'm going to solve my own problem. Ergo, I'll be able to help the world because I'm sure other people
Yeah.
have this lack as well.
Yeah, exactly. And so many things came to me while you were saying all of that. I did a lot of work in time with Tony Robbins, and
Yes.
there are certain things he has programmed in my mind, right? So every
Hmm.
once in a while, I'm in a moment and he's back there. And
Hmm.
one of those things was that he used to say, um, people don't change until they're in pain. And it's like
Hmm.
until I had that moment where I pulled over on the side of the road, I was in physical pain, I was in mental pain, I was in emotional pain, I was tired. Um, that's when you make the change. So just like you're
Yeah.
saying, it's like until you have that experience, it's like
Hmm.
everything's fine. You know,
Yeah.
after that experience, I started not only I'm a self-reflector. I'm wired to self-reflect everything that so I'm constantly in this state of self-reflecting. And I started just looking at other people like, okay, it can't just be me. I have this problem. Okay, let me talk to my friends. Let me meet people on the airplane. Let me ask them what they do, right? And again, the more I talked to friends, especially women in the beginning, the more I saw the same patterns. And even this week, this is years later,
Mm.
I have several good girlfriends here in my building, and they all for weeks have said, I need to meditate, Christine. I'm stressed. My mental health is suffering, but I'm working too much. Like I don't have time. And I send them the schedule. I give them some suggestions. But until they experience a moment where they can no longer stand the pain, right? They won't make the change. And it's unfortunate
Right.
because, BodyOS is called BodyOS, body operating system, because I believe that your body is the greatest technology we there's amazing technology in this world and it's part of this era and we could go on for hours about technology, but we live in a body that has so many functions and abilities and I'll even say magic, right? That we don't even tap into, notice,
Hmm.
appreciate. So all of that, focusing people back into their body and reconnecting
Hmm.
them. Connections, one of the first three C's of Body OS: connection, community, and coherence. And when I
Hmm.
kept coming over and over and over, and I remember I was in my apartment in San Francisco, I had just done my yoga. And when I come out of my yoga or my meditation or my Tai Chi practice, I'm in a state, right? I'm in the flow state. And I walked up to my giant post it notes, which are stuck all over the wall. And I wrote connection to body and to self and to others. And it's like, it's
Hmm.
really about like reconnecting. And I talk to people all the time. I'm in the Uber and I start having a conversation with the driver. And then it's like, well, when are you connected to your body? And they look at me like, what? And it's like, right, the body
Hmm.
isn't sexual. The body is your home, your sacred home that you live in. You should be so connected to it, right? Yet just yesterday I had a conversation with someone about, when you have a stomach ache, you walk around for hours saying, I have a stomach ache, but you don't make all those connections with like, oh, maybe it's because of what I ate or how I slept, or, there's all these things you could start tapping into, or I haven't
Mhm.
drank enough water. Now my, right. But, we live in a world where the answer's always outside somewhere. You got to go find
Yes.
the answer. And the answer's right
Yes.
here. Um, but I call it, we pitch out, right? It's like, you have a stomach ache. Let me go to the washroom. Let me open the drawer and let me find something to take. And that's the backwards way of looking at it. The For me, the
Right.
proper way to look at it would be to go in,
Right.
which these practices do bring you in.
So let's talk a little bit about the practices because you talked about the schedule. Who okay, where are you at in launching? And then what does the schedule look like? What are the offerings and who are the teachers? Who are the guides?
We have a membership that is free. You join the newsletter. That is your membership. And the calendar has all kinds of goodies on it. Uh,
Mm.
you will find more of a work in than a workout. So,
Mhm. Ooh, I love that. Ooh, I
and
love
this
that.
good.
You need to register that. You need to copyright that.
Yeah,
A
yeah, yeah.
work in, not a work out.
And it's interesting, the offerings, and I'm really excited to have you join us because the word yoga, as we had talked about in the beginning, is something I kind of calmly shy away from. We have a yin yoga on the platform,
Mhm.
which is yoga based in traditional Chinese medicine. It deals with the fascia,
Mhm.
and it's my favorite form of yoga. Now,
Mhm.
I've done hatha, all kinds of yoga of the voice. Like there's tons of types of yoga out there. For me right now, yin is the most appropriate for us.
Mhm.
Um, Meditation. There's meditation on the platform. There's breath work, guided journaling, EFT tapping. We have two somatic practices, which are very different. And we do heart math, which you and I chatted briefly about, which is basically a heart math is an institution in California that's been around for 30 years studying one thing, the heart brain coherence.
Wow.
The heart informs the brain more than the brain informs the heart.
I recently heard that. Who would have thought?
Right.
We think it's just all in here.
Yeah. I like to say people live up here. I mean, the
Yes.
conversations I've had with men and women that they're answering me from here.
Yeah.
You can tell when a person drops into their body and their answer comes from their body. It's a very,
Right.
you know, it's a very interesting experience to watch, right? Because we can all answer from here very easily because we're in a world where you have to function from here. I mean, when I
Mhm.
was driving around selling real estate, no, I'm not in my body. I'm in my head. I'm on the phone. I'm talking to lawyers. I'm talking to clients, looking for directions. You're calling me, right? Like all these things are happening. I must live up here. And when I had that moment of clarity in 2016, it was like, I don't want to live up here only. I want to
Mhm.
live down here in my body.
Mhm.
And when I started, I did the heart math training myself. And if you've done any work with Joe Dispenza, Bruce Lipton, Greg Braden, they all work in that space and get a lot of their
It's like the
data.
trifecta of my favorite people. I love all of
Yeah.
them. All of them. Greg Braden is just so like entertaining too. I love everything about it. I'm kind of like in love with Greg Braden at the moment.
But they all pull from heart brain coherence in their own style and in their own beautiful, magical, scientific way. Scientific, which is like a whole nother conversation that I'm going to just jump right into. There is science behind all of these practices. So it's this isn't a woo woo. This isn't a do yoga because it makes you feel good. Now there's science behind Tai Chi and meditation
Mhm.
and yoga, deep science by the Cleveland Clinic,
Mhm.
by other institutions, and I mean by these Western credible. hospitals and such that they prove it, right? So for me, and one interesting fact when I was doing my sound vibration training in San Francisco was the Bay Area, which the San Francisco Bay Area is one of the top 20 most populated places in the world. I mean, it is just there's a lot of people in California, and there's a lot of people in that area, and all of the hospitals in that area
Mm-hmm.
use sound for therapy.
Mm.
Now they don't use it for treatment, but they do honor and use it as therapy,
Mm.
sound vibration, because it has been proven to be effective in healing. Um, so back to the word science is, many people, as I'm chatting and talking and meeting, they're looking for that, right? And I mentioned Joe Dispenza. I was at his week long a few years ago, and I sat next to a couple. They were 23. They were born and raised in India, and they had just moved to the States to go to college. And they were sitting next to me, and Joe was presenting data, so much data. I mean, an hour of data, scientific proof, studies, all about heart brain coherence, meditation. And when he stopped talking, we took a break. And I
Right.
looked at the couple next to me, and they just had a they had a way, they were just sort of quietly sitting there. And I said, "Where are you from?" And they told me, and then I said, "What do you think about all this data and
Yeah.
science?" And they calmly said, "I mean, we don't really need it." And
Right.
I was right, because they were born and raised in a country where meditation and yoga are part of the culture, right? So the science to them was kind of like, cool, this is cool, but we kind of already know, right? And I think
Mm-hmm.
when you get really connected to your body and you live there, you know,
Mm-hmm.
you're not in the middle of Tai Chi saying, what is this doing for me? Because you start to feel the effects on your body,
Mm-hmm.
which is the goal. So back to one of your original questions is, it's for everybody. And I say
Mm-hmm.
it's for anyone who has a body. Okay. If you
Mm-hmm.
live in a body, you can benefit from these practices. We aren't standing on our heads. We're not doing any, most practices are pretty still on the floor, very calming. They are very in line with the yin energy.
Mm-hmm.
And the yin, the feminine, yang, the masculine, we live in the yang world. You can't
Oh
serve.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I created this podcast. I mean, you already know that was to try and connect with women. And we talked a little bit about this where, in my 20s and in my younger years, I always felt like, oh, I'm just like a guy's girl. I just connect with men. I don't really connect with women. I don't know what it was. If it was a competitive thing, I'm not quite sure. But the older I get, the more I kind of only want to be with women. It's really weird. And all I want to do is uplift women, amplify their messages, and just cheer them on from the sidelines as much as I can. It's quite the pivot for me personally. But yeah, we both, work in the real estate industry. It is highly yang. I worked in the professional kitchens, the most yang you could possibly be, and I worked in advertising, another like very, very yang industry. And it's hard. It's hard. April is a yang month. Aries is a yang, which I it kind of goes back and forth throughout the zodiac. It flip flops for each month. And I already have a lot of yang energy. And so it's my work to get in touch with the feminine. And it's hard. It's not easy. It's not easy to just release when you're wound so tight and then you have responsibilities. And we're
It's,
like we're preaching to the choir here, but I know there's a lot of people that are listening that are like they're just feeling that and wanting that release of just like being able to let go for an hour and not have to keep everything together in their lives.
yeah, it's super hard. It was hard for me to go from super yang for most of my life to making the choice to say, I'm going to live in my body more. I
Mhm.
am going to make my wellness practices yin. As
Mhm.
I told you, I still do go, and I go for connection. to do some hit workouts. I take walks, etc. But you won't find me in the gym because so many of my friends, and it's like as a woman, they work in this world of yang,
Mhm.
and they're so wound tight, as you said. They come home from work at 7 p.m. and then they go to the gym. And at the gym
Yeah.
they do more yang. And then they wonder why they have hormonal problems, they have, issues with their cycle, they have health issues. I mean, all kinds of stuff, right? And it's like,
Mhm.
when's the last time you did nothing? And it's so interesting because doing nothing, we had a little brief chat about this, but it's like you're not doing nothing, right? It's almost like going to bed and saying, I'm gonna go to bed, but when I'm sleeping, I'm doing nothing. It's like, no, your body, your brain, there is so much happening at
Yeah.
that point
Yes.
of your day. So much
Yes.
important stuff is happening while you sleep. But if you take a nap, I took a nap today. I was so tired um, that I said I could keep going on the computer and this and that, or I could lay down.
Mhm.
It wasn't because I wanted to do nothing. Um, it was because I knew that I needed to restore something in my
Mhm.
body and my mind to be able to be here with you.
Mhm.
Um, but those types of practices in the modern world and the Western world, or countries that live the Western way, they're looked at as not doing anything, being lazy. And so it's hard to do. And then it's even harder because society pushes you to do the yang thing.
Yes. Yes. Although I feel there's a shift, every single conversation that's being had, we're making an impact right now, and the hustle culture is dying. It's not working. The grind, the push, it's not working. And we can see that. I told a girlfriend recently, because my body will just give out. I wind up getting sick. I have issues with PCOS. I'm often like laid up in my room. It's my body's way of being like, you're in bed. You are not moving. And I told a girlfriend, I was like, I can't talk today. I'm resting. And she's like, what do you mean you're resting? What is you need to rest? You like an old lady? And I'm like, I know my body, and I pushed it too hard. And this is the consequence, is that my immune system, is dealing with little children and all of their germs. And it's saying, like, no, you pushed it too hard and you need to rest. And a couple of weeks later, I called her and I said, yeah, hey, what are you doing? She's like, oh, I'm resting. I was like, you're resting? She goes, yeah.
Yay!
She's like, I gave her permission. And
Dress.
I
Yes.
think that's what, because she was like, wait, I didn't know we were allowed to do, like, from a
Yeah.
cultural perspective. It's like, wait, we're allowed to rest?
We are. And many people still think we are. And I'm gonna stay on the path that we are.
Yeah.
Right? It's
Yeah.
like,
I mean, you have told me personally in business, I've called you. You've been a great resource to me for working out, client problems and things. And the advice you give me is like, go and do yoga, go and be quiet on this, go and meditate on this, be quiet. You don't need to take action. And you've told me, if to manifest for you, it happens on the mat. It doesn't happen out anywhere else. It happens in here. And that always blew me away. And I'm like, oh, Christine, I can't believe she can do that. But you're giving me permission, and then I'm going to give someone else permission, and it's just going to be this trickle down effect.
yeah. And it's interesting. I have a niece who's 16, and I spend a lot of time talking to her. And we spend some time traveling together. And it's like the watching her as a young woman in her generation, right? And she's also an active ballerina. So she's
Wow.
her body moves. I mean, she's
I
very connected, but connected to her body, right?
Oh, good, good. But
And
being
it's
a
like,
ballerina, it can be very, you know, you got to nail that. You got to nail that
well, yeah,
pirouette.
exactly. There is a precision of it.
Precision. Yes, thank you.
But interesting, we were traveling this summer and we were doing some meditation. We were doing the classes on the platform. I join almost every class weekly, every ritual. I'm on there. And so basically I said, you're going to be with me for the month. You're going to be doing this with me, right? And she loves yin because it's really good for your fascia. And when you're done with yin yoga, you just feel amazing.
Mhm.
And we started doing meditations, and I never once did she complain or say, I don't want to do this. She just, kind of jumped right along. And I said, okay, this is cool. And we were at the V&A Museum in London. And it was, I mean, there must have been a million people in the museum. That's what it felt like. And it was just very busy and very loud and very hot. And we were in there chasing down the Taylor Swift exhibit.
It sounds like you're being on the BART.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we walked outside, which was like a breath of fresh air in the summer.
Mhm.
And she looked at me and said, okay, what's next? And I said, well, we've got 45 minutes and then we have to be home to meditate with Sonia online. And she said, oh, it's going to feel so good to sit
Mm.
still and meditate.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
remember it clearly because I was like, yes, thank you. Because at 16, I didn't even have the tools
No.
or
No.
I didn't even know what meditation was. I mean, if you had asked me at the age of 16, I mean, I probably would have said it's something the monks do somewhere or, right? Like, I wouldn't have had enough information. So I love that she, as a woman, a young woman, is not only embodying physical practices, but also the
It's
meditation.
amazing. Yeah, my kids know what meditation is, and sometimes they just sit and they're quiet, and, uh, I think if we can I think the other thing is, in the US, they say, and even from a planetary perspective, we're definitely in our teenage years, but especially in the US, like, we're still figuring out we don't have we're such a melting pot, like, we don't have cultural values. So you were talking about the Indian couple, and they kind of knew all of this. And we're still trying to figure out, okay, well, what are our values? What kind of society do we want to be? Certainly, we're very individualistic versus other Asian, very collectivistic societies. Um, but we're learning, the grind, the hustle doesn't really work. And Gen Z and, younger millennials are like saying no to that. They don't want to climb the corporate ladder. And I recently read this, like they want time, they want freedom, they want flexibility, and they probably might not have kids because they know what comes with all of that. So that's their new American dream. It's not to, buy a house, have 1.5 children, and, you know, do all of these more material things. So we're figuring it out, and it's a little funky and awkward, don't you
Yeah.
think?
You mentioned Gen Z. We were doing some fact checking. We found this. We were doing some research, and it was 61% of Gen Z claims they are lonely.
Mm.
And it's interesting because I'm not really building this platform for anything, as I had said about fitness, right? Losing
Hmm.
weight, being skinny, having a great butt. Like none of that ever comes into my brain. I'm over here going, how can we reduce stress and how can we reduce loneliness? And those two things, you know, keep rolling in. And they do have to do with your body. Because
Hmm.
if your body is stressed, everything's stressed. Your mind's stressed, you're emotionally stressed. The stress and the loneliness are two key drivers. And so when someone says, like, oh, I don't need yoga or I have my own thing, like sometimes people tell me my meditation is running. And I say, great for you. That works. Me, I can't run because I have an injury, but that's great until you can't do it anymore. Right. Yoga is an
Hmm.
interesting practice because it's there for life for you. It's a gentle
Hmm.
practice on your
Hmm.
mind and body.
I find that 61% really fascinating because you could argue that they've never been more
It is.
connected.
Yeah. I know exactly where you're going.
Yeah.
They've never been
So
more
the Tik
connected.
the TikTok, the texting,
Yeah.
the like, can you imagine? I mean, you and I are kind of we're the same age. I remember thinking one day, like, we could be talking on the phone and see each other, and that was like like, and right now we're podcasting from around the world on our screen, being able to see each other. I mean, people used to go years without seeing each other, and it's been a huge blessing for my kids to be able to FaceTime with their grandparents in Ohio and maintain that connection when we're not seeing them in real life. But I just find that so fascinating that they feel lonely,
Mhm.
and how sad
It
that is.
It's very sad, but it's bigger than sad, right? It's a problem for humanity.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
you had singled out America as sort of a confused melting pot, not to rephrase what you said, but
No, that's the yeah, that's fair.
yes. I've had this conversation many times, and it's interesting being outside of America, right? And having traveled, and when I go back into America and looking
Yeah, give
around,
me that perspective. I don't get out. I got these kids, they are like balls and chains. I shouldn't say that. We did go to New Zealand, but I don't get to travel as much. So yeah, give us the global experience.
yeah, it's being in the eastern part of the world, there's still a lot of desire from people here to want
Mhm.
to bring the West this way. So I feel
Mhm.
like I'm working against the grain.
Yes.
Right? So like, listen, there are a lot of great, great things that come out of the West, have come out of the West, will come out of the West. I came from the West. Um, but where you are and where your family is, it's when I talk about America also being this melting pot of cultures, I said to someone just yesterday, I said, in America, you really only have 3, 4 generations deep, and then that's it,
Uh-huh.
with the exception of Native Americans, right? So my family came from all over Europe. One piece of my lineage came from Italy.
Mhm.
And have you heard of the Rosetto effect?
No, but tell me about it. I have heard of the blue zones, but tell me about
Right. Okay.
yeah, let's talk about this.
Yeah. So, the basically Rosetto is there's a town in Italy, and that's where my great 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 grandparents came from.
Okay.
And I grew up in Pennsylvania. And when I was a little girl, we would go every summer. We would make a picnic lunch, put it in the station wagon, drive an hour,
Did you sit in the
the
back
radio.
seat and wave at everyone in the far back?
Yes, and there was that we did at one point. My father was a car salesman, so we always had different types of vehicles. At one point, we
Mm,
had a car backwards facing the back.
that's safe. That's so safe.
I know, but it was really fun.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Yeah, all the things. Yeah. Yeah.
so we would go to Rosetto,
Mm.
Pennsylvania. And it was a
Oh,
small town. My father's family was from there. My great great grandparents were from there. And we would go to this ballpark and we would arrive with our picnic basket, me, my mother, my father, and my sister. And there would be about 100 people there. And everyone just knew everyone. It was a family reunion, right? Now, these weren't people. We didn't have FaceTime. We didn't, these were people I'd only see once a year. But I remember the feeling of being there. You'd arrive and it was
mm,
like people were hugging you and bringing you cake, and everybody wanted to see how the kids had
mm.
grown. And there were other kids, and you get right. And it was this amazing experience. And every summer in August, we would go for one day. And it wasn't until I was in my 30s that I heard about the Rosetto effect. And, had internet and more access to books and Audible and all these things, and started researching and reading. And the Rosetto effect, and have you read The Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell?
Yes. Like a while ago, whenever it came out, yes, I read all of them. I have his new one. I haven't read it yet, but I want to.
So, in the beginning of The Outliers, Malcolm,
Mhm.
in his introduction, talks about the Rosetto
Uh-huh.
effect. It's a short chapter. To me,
Okay,
very impactful.
I don't remember it. So bring us up to speed.
1882, Italian immigrants looking for a better life, poor quality of life where they were in Italy, in Food. got wind of America. This is 1880s. Jumped on a boat, very inconvenient, made it to New York, spent the night in New York, made their way to Pennsylvania, a couple hours, and basically settled there. Now, they worked in slate quarries. There was only about 10 or 11 of them that came over. Next year, they sent for more. Hundreds of immigrants from this little town in Italy came over to Pennsylvania. Now, they weren't well loved by their neighbors. So the neighboring towns were the English, the German. So they stayed super insular. Okay. They didn't have this need to go outside of their community. They stayed together. They didn't compete with each other. They helped each other. And they stayed like that for years and years and years. So you're talking late 1800s. In the 1950s, a U.S. doctor wandered through, Dr. Stuart Wolf. He came through from Oklahoma on his way to a conference. One thing led to another, and it was brought to light that the Rosettans weren't suffering from heart disease, cardiovascular disease, which was rampant in the United States at the time. So perplexed, one thing, again, led to another. They set up camp. They started testing the Rosettans. Now, I can vouch for you that from the current standards, they were not the healthiest bunch. Okay? We would go there when I was little, and we'd be eating meatballs and brajol and wine. Well, I wasn't having wine, but they were drinking wine and, sweets. And there was no one was at the gym. No one was running. There was nothing green happening to eat, right? It was this Italian lard-filled food, which was delicious.
I love brajol.
So these doctors were like, is it their diet? I mean, is it the diet? How could this possibly be the diet, right? In the U.S., it's like margarine and butter and all these other things are happening. And, it's coming into sort of convenient food and processed foods and canned foods. And it's not the diet. So then they said, is it exercise? And as I covered, it was not exercise. They weren't doing any more exercise. Now, the men were working in the slate quarries, but nothing else, no other types of exercise were happening for the women. Was it their genetics? No, they went through all of that. And so now a decade has gone by, and the U.S. government basically has people there just testing them because they're scientists. They need to find the answer. What is the reason that this one insular community, is it the soil? Is there something in the air? Like what's going on here? And they basically concluded that it was their whole environment and who they surrounded themselves with and their way of communal living, right? They weren't trying to keep up with each other. They didn't have a fence between their houses. It wasn't my yard and your yard, Emily. It wasn't my kids and your kids. It was our kids. We were raising them together. There was a sense of communal living, which is more common in an environment in Europe or in the eastern part of the world where cultures are generational in the same place, right? You still have families that, you have the great-grandparents, the grandparents, parents, one of the kids say, that still exists. That's a reason for that. And in America, everyone is scattered, including myself.
I know.
Right?
It makes me sad. Like, it makes me sad that I don't live in Ohio with my parents. And it makes me sad to think one day that my kids will go off and live a totally different life and I'll never see them again.
Well, you'll see them again. You might have to visit.
But you have to make the effort. It would be like, okay, well, because it's like, you got to go where the jobs are, and people.
Well, that's the grass is greener. I am looking for the better life. And it's interesting because when I read these books, there's all kinds of information on the Rosetto effect. I actually found this book from the 70s that I got years ago, it's called The Power of Clan, The Influence of Human Relationships and Heart Disease, written by the doctor that I had mentioned. And don't bother trying for it on Audible. You'll have to borrow my copy because it's not easy to find. But it's more than just it makes you sad, right? It's sad for humanity because what does the future look like? if it's known that community helps you have a healthier body and live
Mhm.
longer, right? Is it something where living communally without your relatives might be a solution, right? You see housing being developed now. You see longevity centers. You see, like, could we live better as we're older?
Yes.
Can you and I be
Yes.
roommates in our 80s and do our yoga? Yes,
Yes.
that probably would have the same or similar effect, right? Um, so more than being sad, it pains me that it's sort of this mm, grass is greener. And when I look
Mhm.
back to 1882 and someone says, your great 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 grandparents came over in 1882 looking for a better life, part of me goes, a better life? Now, I didn't.
But they brought everyone with them. They brought, they could have just gone on their own and been like, "See ya." They
Well, here's what's
brought it with them.
interesting. They brought everyone with them, and I can visualize this town. So think of like a little sleepy town, Main Street, a
Mhm.
bakery, a doctor, a beautiful church, cemetery, right? Just a small
Sounds like
town,
Sebastopol.
very similar,
Yeah.
modest living. And I went there a couple years ago. I actually I went there in December, a month ago, to visit one of my cousins who still lives there. And it's interesting to me when I'm there now, it's quiet, right? It's
Mhm.
not bustling because they
Mhm.
brought everyone with them in the late 1880s into the early 1900s. But Emily, everyone eventually left. So
Mhm.
my great great grandparents, my grandparents, they left Rosetto
Mhm.
for what? For better opportunities to go from the slate quarries to work in the steel,
Mhm.
right? And they came down to where those opportunities were. So it's so, I come from America. I have a lot of, um, I'm very blessed, right? I understand that. But then I kind of go like, is the grass always greener, right?
Mhm.
I often say that, uh, the body's resilient, but not without consequence, right? So it's like,
Mhm.
yeah, we can live like this, but there is a consequence to it. Like yes,
Mhm.
you have a fine life, you live in, great place, you have your kids, but at what point do we value our physical and mental health enough to say, I'm going to pick up my kids and move to Ohio. I'm going to move back in with my family and I'm going to be around them.
Mhm.
It's like, we all have to make a choice in what we value. I live on the other side of the world. I mean, I battle this in my mind, right? Do I want to go live in Pennsylvania? Not really. But when I was walking through the
That's
streets,
because
it
you
was,
and I both grew up in the snow. We know what it's like.
well, when I was in Rosetto a few weeks ago with my mom, and it was cold and snowy, and we were at the cemetery and we were visiting my wonderful cousin. There is something there. And
I
this is
know.
going to take me in the next question you had, which was the blue zones,
Mhm.
right? So the blue zones are a newer phenomena, right? And I've read about them. I haven't studied them intensely, but this summer I was lucky enough to be in the Greek islands,
Mhm.
and I had some time. And a friend suggested I explore some other islands. And knowing I was super close to Ikaria, which is one of the Blue Zone islands, I said, I gotta go. I gotta go see what all this Blue Zone's about. I know what it's like going to Rosetto. I understand the history. I understand the study of science behind it. Okay, that's interesting to me. Let me go to a blue zone and see what's up. I mean, if I eat the soil, am I going to live long? Like, what is there that makes it so special? Now, the Greek islands are pretty special and beautiful and lovely. So I got on the ferry. I got to Ikaria, and from the first moment I got there, everything is inconvenient there. And it's like I arrived, I didn't have a car, I couldn't find a driver, I couldn't find a taxi, there was no transport. I mean, it's like, okay, what do we do now? Um, Luckily I'm resourceful. Like, I called the guy who I had rented the Airbnb from, and he said, I'll come pick you up. So he comes to pick me up. He takes me to this Airbnb. It's Ikaria is a big mountain. So most of the living is on the coast around it.
Hmm.
And so he takes me to this little house on the coast, shows me where the beach is. On the way there, he says, do you want to stop at the grocery store? And I thought, great idea. I stop at the grocery store. I grab something like 5 things, like a thing of pasta, I don't know, some bananas, like some really basic stuff. And we go, I check into the Airbnb and he leaves. So I go down to the beach. First night's great. I'm in the ocean. Some guy swims up. There's 2 people on the beach with me. He swims up with an octopus in his hand. Okay. I'm like, this is like so cool.
Hi.
Yeah. And his wife's, they were from Italy. And so we were talking and he brought it up to make dinner. She was going to make dinner. And I'm like, right. Okay. This is a cool way of living. I go, right. You just swim out there, you grab what you need. Right. And so I'm like, okay. I go back up to my little house. I make some pasta with butter or something. Next day comes and I'm thinking I should probably get a car. I had been working on it, but I hadn't had any luck for obvious reason. I finally had someone call me back after an insane amount of tries, and they said, we have a rental car for you in about 10 days. So I'm learning this lesson, which is like, this is super inconvenient, but this is beautiful here. So I'm just going to go jump back in the ocean. I'm not going to worry about it. I had internet,
Right.
which was super convenient. The guy who owned the Airbnb ran the internet company on the island. So
Nice.
yeah. So if
Nice.
you ever need to go podcast in Ikaria, let me know the place to stay.
Might be better.
Um, yeah. So I went to the healing waters, which is what they're known for. I went into the bathhouse. I did the whole
Wow.
ritual where you go in this healing water. I went down I finally found a driver um, to not just drive me, but to show me around. He was a taxi driver,
Yeah.
which there were only a couple dozen. To get around the islands, like hours, 'cause it's huge.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
he takes me into the coast and he says, this is where CNN filmed. Okay, well, if CNN's been here, then sure it's safe and good. Jump in the water and there's rocks and there's a pool, a circle of rocks. And he says, go in there, go in the rocks. And I'm a little squeamish and the rocks are super slippery. And I get to the circle, the rocks, I put my hand in it. I mean, it's so hot. It's these springs, these hot,
Wow.
right? And everyone's got around is go, get in, get in. And I'm thinking it feels like boiling water. And so okay. I'm doing the healing water things. I'm good to go. Now I've been to eat Korea, right? So I spent a few more days. I moved to the other side of the island. I went to a hotel. The town had like 4 restaurants in it. We lost power one night, so nobody ate, and everybody just went to bed because the whole island lost power, and it was all fine. It's like
Yeah.
in those moments, you're like, yeah, this is fine. I'm gonna go to bed because I have no lights in the room and I have no food. So, right, it's like the way of life there, and
Simple.
it's not even simple. It's like super inconvenient. And
Mm.
I'm not saying that as a negative thing, right? In America, everything's convenient. Where I live here, everything is so convenient. I literally, if I wanted sushi right now, I could order it on my phone while I'm talking to you and it would show up at my door, right?
Right.
Right. It's like, it's so convenient. I mean, like, when we were kids, we couldn't have even fathomed what sushi was, probably, let alone having it delivered to your door.
Right.
So going and having this experience there, my take on that particular island was it's not the sand, it's not the water, it's not the place necessarily. It's that it's an island and it's so inconvenient that if you live there, you have to know everybody. If you're the butcher, you know the baker. If you're the taxi driver, you know the person that runs the school. Like, if you don't work in a communal way, you don't survive, right? You're on an island together. And Rosetto was a little bit of an island in Pennsylvania. It didn't have water
Hmm.
around it, but it was an energetic island. They had this like wall
Hmm.
around energy. So
Hmm.
came away from that blue zone with that same sort of like, you gotta live as a community. You
Yes.
have to. It's not just it's not just nice or a theory. It's like when you live together and you're not competing against each other, you live longer, you live better, you live happier. You have better health, you have better mental health.
Yeah, I would like to do a whole circuit around the world just doing bath houses, and I'd love to go to Reykjavik and that whole area, and like I'm obsessed with water and experiencing all of that. So the community piece, I want to tie it back to BodyOS because it's a different platform. It's done via Zoom, correct? And the teacher is having an interaction with you, which is different than some of the experiences that I have actually not taken a class online.
Really?
Um, no, no. I just, during the pandemic, I had an 18-month-old or like a 20-month-old, and I had broken my foot like during lockdown. I fell down the stairs of the Presidio. Everyone falls down these stairs of the Presidio. They're just like really dangerous stairs. Number one place where you can have an accident in your home. You probably know that. I fell down the stairs running to answer a client call, which I will never do
Do it.
again. Never.
Yeah.
If the phone rings,
Universe, thank you, slowed you down.
you slow me down. And if the phone is ringing, like my kids sometimes are like, Mom, your phone's ringing. And you can feel that like, I got to respond and I got to get the phone. And I'm like, I'm going to safely get there. And if I get there then yeah,
Yeah.
definitely operating, like out of a fear base, like, oh, I got to get the call or
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So I broke my foot, and was in a boot for, I don't know, 6 weeks and just dealing with two kids during the pandemic and essentially like homeschooling. We did get a Peloton. I always said the 4 Ps or the 3 Ps of the pandemic were puppies, piano, and Peloton, the 3 Ps, which we got all. We got a puppy and we got a piano and we got a Peloton. So I did Peloton, and yeah, the Peloton experience, obviously you're not having any interaction with the teacher other than if they're calling you out for, a certain ride. And I remember going to some classes after the pandemic and there was still people zooming in, like they were joining the classes remotely and they would be like, hey, like, so all, and you would just kind of get to, but
Yeah.
I'm taking a long time saying this. You're saying the instructor, and I haven't done a class yet. I'm going to hopefully get to do one this weekend, that the instructor, the guide is saying, hey, Christine, good morning. So you
Yeah.
have that community built into it. So let's talk a little bit about that because I think it's a differentiator.
It's super important, and it's so funny that you say this today. So currently where I live, the rituals are between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. So I have a big middle of my day where I do work and other things. And I was in the mood today
Mm-hmm.
to do some vinyasa.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to say who, but I have an online membership to a studio in Europe that I can stream their live classes.
Okay.
And it's so funny because the moment I log in,
Mm-hmm.
there's exactly what you're saying. She's teaching to a room full of people, which is her priority. I'm like way in the back on a little screen. Okay?
Fly on the wall.
Yeah. And we're not even 5 minutes into it. And my entire body is irritated because it's reminding me of 2020 when we were in the pandemic and I was trying to Zoom online, trying to log into these classes. The teacher's trying to teach and trying to manage the Zoom and all these things are happening. And today's class was not that great because the teacher kept leaving, right? She kept leaving the screen to walk around the And I've been doing vinyasa for over a decade, right? I pretty much know what I'm doing if I'm cute.
Right.
I can do it. There are more complex postures and flows, and there are more simple. It's so important to me when you are streaming the auditory cue and keeping things simple. She kept turning us around on our mat, face the back, face the front.
Oh, yeah. I've been to
And
those classes.
every time I face the back, I lost her, right? Yeah, I can hear her, but she's not cueing us properly. And I'm getting so frustrated because then she finally comes back on the screen and doesn't even look. There were, I think, 6 or 7 of us zooming in just to notice that a couple of us are like, right, like trying to figure out what everyone's doing. Okay, it's a super ineffective way to flow. It's like you have to live up here, and so it's really important to me that the guides, we call them guides, on the platform, cue properly and are only teaching to us.
Right. They're teaching to you.
Many
This
of them
isn't
are
like
sitting there. My
you're not an afterthought.
no, my very, very, very best vinyasa teacher, Melissa, amazing. She used to teach me privately then she taught me privately and back, I think, starting in 17 or 18. She would sit. I remember the first time with her, I'm like, is she not going to do the thing? She's not going to do the posture. She's so laser focused. Emily, move. Yep, correct. Emily. Okay, like on what you're doing. If she goes and she starts doing it herself, a few things happen. The microphone gets muffled up if she's, clothes are in the way, and she's lost connection. So it's super important to me. Our guides will demonstrate because I'm really into the guides being their authentic self. So it's like cue and demonstrate, or just cue, or everyone has a different flavor. And for example, we have 4 yin teachers. They all teach yin in a very different way, and they attract different people, right? And it's surprising because the guests that come, their feedback, right? It's like Catalina teaches yin, and I have 2 women from California that zoom in every week just for Catalina, just for the way she teaches yin. She teaches yin in a very direct way. She explains, right? It's like it's her method. Then we have Charlie out of London. She teaches, right? Hers is a little softer and she does sound vibration baths at the end, right? And so everyone has their own flavor, and I embrace that because the guest and the guide are equally important to me. It's not about any teacher, any guide, right? It's like finding a variety of people from around the planet. We've got people Hawaii. We've got guides in Hawaii. We have guides in Europe. We have one in Africa. We have some coming up in Australia. Obviously, we have one in West Coast, California. So it's like for me, it doesn't matter where they live, right? They're zooming in, whatever's convenient for them and fits the platform. So connection and community tie in, right? So back to what you were saying, it's like I live alone and I work alone, and I get lonely, right? I told you I go do my HIIT workouts just to connect with people, just so I walk into Barry's and they say, Christine, how are you? Are you going to have a strawbanana shake today? And I immediately feel seen, heard, they remember me, they make my protein shake, like, wow, I get some connection out of it. Same thing when you're online, right? And in the class I took today on this other platform, I didn't feel seen.
Right.
And I
Well,
actually
you
felt,
weren't. You weren't. You were
yeah,
kind of an inconvenience.
yeah. And so so these small tweaks, how it's done is super important. We also have someone running the Zoom in the background. So I'm participating in the class. I am here on my yoga mat, which is right behind me. I am doing the meditation. I'm doing the tapping. I'm doing the heart math rituals. I'm not managing the room
Right.
or the music or the fact that Emily popped in 5 minutes after. Myself and the guy don't have to go, okay, hang on, everybody. Sorry about that. We have to let Emily in. Like, even those tweaks, I come from a background in hospitality, as you know, and hospitality and 5-star plus, right? It's like you don't call people out because they're coming in late, right? Like there's it's like it's all about how you feel, through these different threads of my life, working in hotels, working in real estate. Like it is about how you make people feel, whether you're selling them a house or you're, selling them a block of hotel rooms, or you're, cooking their dinner, whatever. It's like, how do they feel when they're done with that service? And that's super important to me.
It really feels like you're curating the best possible experience and pulling from the best teachers around the world.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I have this conversation of like what makes the best teacher.
Mhm.
And again, there's so many flavors. The goal is to have
Totally.
the goal is
Totally.
to
What there is no is so subjective.
Yeah. Right. I mean, I have had teachers where their voice irritates me.
Yes.
I never go back to the class because they spoke too fast, or their tone, right? Or I just didn't like their method, right? It's
Yeah.
fine. Nothing.
Yeah.
Then I have someone else that says it's my favorite class, hands down. They're the best. Okay. So keeping that in mind, when I'm looking for people, I'm looking for people that teach and they're authentic. First of all, teachers are artists, right? They have a gift to give. They're in their highest vibration when they're teaching. They're giving that
Mhm.
gift, right? They're not like over here managing the Zoom room and like, no, they're teaching. I used to be a teacher. I studied education and I was a school teacher. Slightly different, but not really. When I was in the classroom with the children in the thing, right? That was my highest and best way to be teaching. So I'm really looking for authentic teachers
Mhm.
who teach their way.
Mhm.
When someone says like, "Oh, how do you want me to do the class or the ritual?" And it's like, "Your way, Emily," because someone's gonna love your way. So there's a variety of guides on the platform now, and we're always looking for. It's funny. It's not the best. It's sort of like just the most authentic and a diverse group.
Mhm. I love it. So let's tell everyone how they can find it. I can put it in the show notes so we can have the link. Is there any other information people should know to sign up? Like you said, it's free now, but it sounds like this is really just a beta. And so people
Well,
can have kind of a flavor and then that'll obviously change in the future.
yeah. So right now, the newsletter's free. Once you
Okay.
sign up for the newsletter, you receive a weekly newsletter, which is me writing. Then in that newsletter, you receive the link to the rituals.
Mhm.
They are $10 a ritual
That's very
and
affordable.
very affordable. I went round and round for years researching, studying, understanding the psychology behind free versus someone paying for something. People tell me they take free yoga online, and there's all kinds of things. I had a very dear friend of mine say, "I won't do it unless it's $30." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "I go to Soul Cycle in New York because $30." And I said, "Okay." So to him, he needs to pay a lot to value something,
Mhm.
right? I mean, the science behind all of this, the science behind membership models and
Mhm.
studying gyms, and what's important to me is you coming to the ritual. I said to several people working on some marketing and advertising and how to take our current guests and have them invite their friends and bring part of their community on. It's like people will people will feel value if they've paid for something, right? If they've signed up and they've paid some money, if you signed up and you've paid $10, you're likely to come.
Yeah.
Now, if you have a showing on a $50 million house, you would also be likely to forego the $10,
Right.
of course, right? But you'll show up for the next one, and it won't even bother you, right? You'll understand the opportunity cost was you need showing. So it it it's about you showing up, not about us making money. And when we were
Right.
talking about measuring, it's like if someone pays and doesn't show up, it's not a win for me. So it's like
Right.
our measurement is off of you being in that room. And a lot of our rituals are 30 minutes because in
Mhm.
this study, somewhere in the modern world, someone said, you gotta do, you gotta do your thing for 60 minutes, Emily. You gotta do your whatever. I mean, how many classes at studios and gyms
Yeah.
worldwide? 60 minutes, 55 minutes so they can change the room.
Yeah.
Right.
And I just read a piece of information. That's, I guess, what I should just call it these days because it's just information. I read information that said they looked at weightlifting for 30 minutes versus 60 minutes, and there was no difference in the benefit of an additional 30 minutes. So you don't need, I don't know where the whole 60-minute came from,
Yeah,
or
and
55.
most of our rituals, 30 minutes is plenty.
Yeah.
Our yin yoga, we do a full 60 minutes because it's that type of practice.
Well, and there's a lot of, you know, time in a particular position. Yeah.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
not like, let me, let me
Yeah.
shorten it up.
That would feel rushed because it's, yeah.
Yeah, well, because in yin, you're relaxing your muscles.
Right.
Can't
It
tell you
takes
how many
time.
times I'm in the yin posture and the guide cues is your jaw relaxed. And there you are trying to, you're in pigeon or you're in your posture and you're trying to let shoulders go from right. And you, my jaw. Oh yeah, my jaw. Right. I mean, we do that when I was selling real estate full time. I'd walk around with my shoulders in my ears. The
Yeah.
amount of
I do that.
yeah, of
Hmm.
course. And so, yeah, so getting into yin, it's almost like in 30 minutes, you have not relaxed enough to like, right?
Right.
Like your
Right.
muscles are still relaxing. So sign up for the newsletter, access to the
Right.
classes. Yeah,
Awesome. Well,
we got to
thank you so much. We had such an awesome conversation. We talked for over an hour, and I feel like we could just keep talking and talking. And I'm looking forward to supporting it, telling all my friends, getting the message out there, getting people to sign up for the newsletter, and then following this to see what it really becomes, and hopefully it hits all of those goals for you, which is the community, the connectedness,
and the coherence.
and the coherence. Yeah. So thank you so much, Christine, for coming on.
All right. Have a fabulous day. Thanks for having me, Emily.
Thanks.
All right. Bye.
Thank you for joining me today. For more info, you can always find us at yin-project.com. Make it a great day.